I'd like to call this Council and Budget Committee meeting to order. And Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
All members of Council are present. Mayor Redekop.
Thank you. There are no announcements this evening. There is an addendum. We have a presentation by the new CEO of the Fort Erie Public Library, Jen Kendall. And we also have a presentation by Jonathan Jansen, which will appear after, after the report about the library and before the presentations of the budget. So, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There are none, so I will hand the chair over to Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll begin with our presentation. Jen Kendall, CEO of the Public Library.
All right, there we go. All right, well, good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. It's a pleasure to be here this evening and present the budget for the Fort Erie Library for 2025. So at the Fort Erie Library, we aim to fulfill the informational and recreational requirements of the residents of Greater Fort Erie with an emphasis on education in a cost-effective manner. We're striving to achieve this through access, empowering patrons through information and skill development, and enhancing the overall quality of life in Fort Erie through literacy, cultural enrichment, and community building. Last year, we had over 100,000 visits, hosted hundreds of programs for thousands of attendees, and loaned the greatest amount of materials that we have since 2019. Looking forward, we intend to assess how community needs have shifted and adjust our services to match while retaining our current in-demand offerings. In 2024, we launched the Library of Things, thanks in part to the support of the Friends of the Fort Erie Public Library. This collection has non-traditional items like pickleball or radon screeners. It's been very popular. While we did have our challenges, we still had 5,698 program attendees, and our visits increased 20% over 2023 and are up nearly 50% since 2022. Our physical circulation is up over last year, with the biggest percentage increase at the Stevensville branch, which is up about 25%. And then the next largest increase was our digital circulation. We have a number of extremely popular programs, from book clubs to Tai Chi. In addition to the regular program attendees, TD Summer Reading Club itself had over 1,700 attendees over the months of June, July, and August. We also have our notable annual partnerships like our tax clinic. Last year we had a 261% increase in attendees for that. And while we're not expecting quite as big of a jump this year, we're certainly prepared to help more people this year. And this in particular provides a lot of value to the community by ensuring that people who do not have the resources or ability to file their taxes are getting them filed and receiving the benefits that they're entitled to. One of the first things I did upon becoming CEO was to conduct a survey of our patrons to determine their needs and gather valuable input on the public's perception of the library. This was conducted both in branch and online. We had a number of responses, many of them focused on the collection and program offerings, providing helpful feedback on what the community would like to see us do. Several concerns that were raised are items that the board and I have already addressed, and the more detailed feedback on programs and collection has been provided to the staff to inform their actions and decisions when appropriate. We will be doing a series of surveys this year, one each quarter, to gather information about how we can continue to align our services with the community's needs and to inform our upcoming strategic plan. When compared to other libraries with similar service areas, so that's other Ontario libraries with populations of 30 to 50,000 people, we're doing fairly well. We're above average in most categories. Our circulation per active card holder is 5th out of 19 libraries in this cohort. Since last year, we've seen a 21% increase in foot traffic, a trend we expect to continue this year. In this cohort, we are first in public computer stations per card holder and second per capita. It's which is very beneficial for our community members or people visiting who need internet access but do not have a library membership. As I mentioned, we've had a substantial increase in digital circulation, but we also invested in our physical collection, adding over 4,000 items to that. And when assessing our costs compared to these similarly sized libraries, our total operating expenditure of $51.75 is in the lower half, and it's over $9 below the average for that cohort. Our annual funding per capita is slightly higher than that of our operating expenditure per capita of $51.75. And the library brings substantial value to the community, not just through recreation, learning, and providing a safe gathering space. We also provide free educational resources for job seekers, entrepreneurs, and small businesses. Our health information resources and programs promote healthy behaviors, promote mental health support, and allow community members to connect with each other, all of which have a host of proven benefits on communities. When using the Ontario Library Services Return on Investment Calculator, which factors in a number of things, circulation, program attendance, the impact of an open hour of the Fort Erie Library is over $1,000. So our funding per capita is in line with other libraries in the region. I'll just note that these are the latest numbers I had for everybody, so it's from 2023, and the population numbers are from the census, so I could have an even playing field there. We slightly increased our hours in 2024. One of our biggest constraints with hours is staffing. We obviously can't have staff alone for safety reasons. But as part of our surveys this year, we will be checking with patrons to ensure that our current operating hours are meeting community needs. Our physical circulation is up over last year, as I mentioned, with the biggest percentage increase at the Stevensville Library. Our digital circulation is up an average of nearly 12%, with over 56,000 circulations of just digital items. So in 2024, some of the challenges that we faced and continue to face are the rising operational costs of utilities, wages, materials, the increased demand for programs and our resources, and inflationary pressures on supplies and services. The largest increase in our budget for next year is obviously in payroll and benefits. This is not due to the addition of any roles. This is just planning for a full staffing complement at the library. I also, in preparing the budget, the board and I carefully reviewed our prior year expenditures to identify unusual or one-off costs that we don't expect to repeat, so that way we don't have to account for those. And then even with the increase that we're expecting in utilities, the utilities and building maintenance repair should only increase about $3,000 to get combined. And obviously, to meet those needs, especially with the increase in utilities and materials, we're had to adjust our revenues accordingly. We will be taking some money from our trust fund which is reflected in the other revenue category. And we also, thanks to the very impressive efforts of the Friends of the Fort Erie Library, are anticipating an increase in the library receipts category as they've expanded their fundraising to help us with those items. So a full staffing complement has been our #1 priority at the Fort Erie Library. As you are aware, there's been an unusual amount of turnover over the past few years, which has unduly burdened our customer-facing staff as they have worked tirelessly to maintain the standard of service at the library. And so taking some of that pressure off of them has been very important to me. When it comes to our materials line, we're leveraging several partnerships, such as Link, to reduce duplication of effort and spending. Our utility costs continue to rise, and we are looking at modernizing our wiring and lighting in some of the buildings in attempts to mitigate some of the cost increase. While our programs was significantly lower than average in 2024, and it is going up almost 50% over our actual spending, these costs are associated with structuring and running the programs with in-house staff as part of our ongoing commitment to maintaining fair fair and consistent working conditions. And technology costs have risen, but we do project a substantial savings in administration and general facilities costs, so that line will be decreasing slightly. As I mentioned, we have our own capital projects coming up. We have numerous demands on our funding. We're seeing a lot more foot traffic, but we also have repairs and necessary upgrades to the facilities. Some of them are smaller, like adjusting the service desks to ensure that workflows are happening adequately. Some of them are serious, more serious, such as unaddressed electrical issues and dealing with leaks and plumbing issues at some of the branches. And then, so yeah, in conclusion, the library plays a crucial role in our community, and our proposed budget will allow us to continue providing direct value to the people of Fort Erie. Thank you for your time. All right.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions? Councillor Noyes?
Excuse me. Thank you, Councillor Flagg, and thank you for your presentation. It's very interesting to watch. I noticed the utilities went up considerably, at 36% or something like that. I don't know the exact number.
Yes.
And just a thought, in Stevensville, do we have separate meters for the library, or is it all one building?
I'm not sure of that. I can find out and let you know. I know we receive a bill from the town at the end of the year, but I can see if we have separate meters or not and get back to you on that.
I'm just curious, and if we don't have separate meters, what is the percentage that's tagged towards the library as opposed to the rest of the hall?
No.
Thank you.
Your worship?
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Kendall. Just a few questions with respect to your presentation. In slide 6, I don't know if you can get to that, has the key numbers. And one of the key numbers is 38.5 titles held per capita. What does that?
So that means it should actually be materials held per capita, but it means that for every person in Fort Erie, we have 38.5 items. So
that could be books, could be...
books, digital items, in the library, things in the library of things, DVDs. But essentially, if everyone in Fort Erie set out to read or borrow a different thing from the library every week, it would be Halloween before anyone had to repeat an item.
Thank you. And if I might, Chair, on the next page, or on page 8, you've got the regional budget comparison, and you've got the amount that Niagara Falls spends per capita, but they're not on the next slide, which is the comparative hours of service. Do you have that information?
I can get that for you. The reason they're not on this slide is because they have so many more locations. Their hours are so much greater that it flattened everyone out to the point where we couldn't see the comparison between the libraries that are on this slide.
In a place like Lincoln Pelham, which is on the next slide, do they have Sunday hours? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I believe they do, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
And then just on the page that shows the budget expenditures, it shows that for 2025, the budget for programs and promotion is actually going down $6,900.
So that comparison is the 2024 budgeted amount to the proposed amount, not the actuals to the proposed.
Right. It's still going down, and there's a slide further on where programming is going up 47%.
That's compared to the actual spending? I'm sorry, it's a little confusing. It's the amount that was reduced to 6,900 is contracted services, where because we were in a position where we had staff paid to do a thing, and then we were paying businesses to also run programs. So we're not going to be relying on businesses to host our programs because we have staff to do that.
Okay, and the lion's share of any change has to do with payroll and benefits, so you're trying to make sure that you've got the staff necessary to operate an effective...
Correct.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation, and welcome to the new role as well.
Thank you.
I just want to say I love the work the Port Erie Public Library does, including the newsletter. You guys do a fantastic job telling what it is you do, and I think it's quite useful. I was also quite shocked when first elected to learn about the usage of the Fort Erie Public Library, and it was very different from what I would have thought before coming here. So my question is, I think there's a natural connection between arts, culture, and library services, and I just wanted to see if you had any comments with respect to, do you think there's room for new opportunities or partnerships between those three groups to do more in Fort Erie to support all three, including the library services?
Absolutely. Partnering with a variety of community organizations, but especially when it comes to culture and art, is something that we are prioritizing. We also have, in one of our rooms, we have an art gallery display, and we finally have an artist who's booked in to use that space for the first time, so it's really interesting that we'll have a local artist also showing their things off at the library.
Perfect. Well, thank you for the presentation, and look forward to chatting with you more.
Thank you.
Before I go back to Councillor Noyes, anyone else? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. I thought of another question. Again, thank you for your presentation, Ms. Kendall. In the recent past, let's say going back a year or so, probably before your time, I think, the Stevensville branch was closed on and off for a number of days, and I think at one point almost a week. I don't know the reasoning. I'm assuming it was staffing or whatever. Is there anything in place to I know I received a few calls and that the people would show up at the library and it was closed when it was scheduled to be opened. And I understand there's things that we can't control, but there didn't seem to be any alternative to other than closing the Stevensville branch. Have you had any opportunity to look at alternatives that if you have a problem in branch A, so rather than closing it completely for a number of, I think it was, I can't remember how many days it was closed, but is there no alternative when that happens so that you don't close down a branch for?
Yeah, I think I know this. So there was definitely a situation where we had to close suddenly for repairs at Stevensville, so it might have been that. But I'll be assessing the various plans and emergency plans, and I'll make sure that there are contingency plans for when we do have to close branches, so that way we can still try to provide some level of library service in those communities if it's going to be an extended closure.
Thank you for that explanation. If it should happen again, let's hope it doesn't. And I'm not sure what the reason is. I think there might have been a leak, but there was other reasons too, I guess. Can you let council know so that when we do get these phone calls, we can explain it?
Yes.
What's going on? I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you to Ms. Kendall. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was excellent. The slide deck was excellent. Lots of information. Thank you very much. I did have one question, though, just having been a board member in the past and, realizing the situation. The provincial grant, have you received any indication from the provincial government that they're looking to expand that or extend it? It's been that same number forever, and I know there's always rumors occasionally come up, and just wondering.
Yeah, I haven't heard any rumors to the effect. There usually are some whispers about, I do hope that the provincial government will increase library funding. I know it's been quite some time, and it, would be excellent to take some of the burden off of municipalities to help increase library service. But I haven't heard anything, but if I do, I will definitely let everyone know.
Preaching to the choir on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Great. Thanks, Ms. Kendall. Welcome to Southern Ontario, and I'm sure that you thought it was going to be balmy when you left Portage la Prairie, but...
I grew up in the Philadelphia area, so I did know kind of what I was getting myself into weather-wise. So, it's been... Thank you all.
So that'll bring us to reports, and Report 521 CBC 04 2025 on the floor. So moved by His Worship. Comments, questions? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned earlier, I think did an excellent job with the presentation. I think some of the movement around in the wage side, I think, is justifiable. I'm going to be supporting this. I think they're asking for a reasonable increase, and I certainly look forward to the success and the continued increase that they're seeing. I'm very happy about this, so that was just a quick comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Noyes.
Again, I think this is the money that's going to be, has been and will be well spent, and I think that is reflected in the increased usage, and I'll speak of Stevensville, particularly Stevensville, having the largest, a substantial increase in the number of patrons, and as Stevensville and Black Creek grow and grow and grow, we're going to see more of that, so they do need a budget to be able to staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposition? It's carried. And that brings us to 6, and presentation. Jonathan, you cleared the room, buddy. Excellent, well done there.
We're the friends of the Fort Erie budget. We need to work on that. Okay.
When you're ready, Jonathan, thank you.
All right, thank you. Welcome everyone tonight. So this is our last budget meeting, as all goes well, for the 2025 budgets. Of course, having met in November and December for both the capital and then the fees and then water and wastewater reports. The presentation tonight you can find through the eScribe agenda. There's links on our town website as well that can guide any of our residents or anyone following along there. I encourage you to ask as many questions as possible. We always talk about having a balance between summarizing and providing detailed information, and hopefully we find a bit of that balance. Thank you to Jen and the rest of the library group with her as well for their presentation. We're certainly looking forward to working together with them and happy to share this meeting with them tonight. And before we begin, I just do want to thank Mayor and Council, in particular for contributing, helping to get where we are, and for supporting this process, not just with the budget meetings themselves, but certainly year-round when we talk about that. Thank you to our CAO, Chris McQueen, for his leadership and guidance and role in helping get us to where we are tonight. Our directors, our managers, our payroll analysts, inputters, executive assistants, many staff have a hand in preparing what you see tonight, and want to give them a great thanks. Truly a team effort. Particular note, Nanette, who one of the greatest benefits for this group is she does also bring in supper, but much more than that, of course. She's our coordinator of financial planning and analysis, and there's a few months where it seems like together we eat and sleep on budget. So special thanks to her. So if you want to just bring up the budget presentation. And then I have the control here. So we have the agenda. This is this fairly typical format. Try to keep things fairly predictable and consistent in terms of picking out what's changed and what's new. Really, the budget is telling a story for our community and for you as council. We have a little map in the background of this agenda page, really is a tribute to all the different communities and areas and residents and subdivisions and businesses and industries that are part of this incredible community. And I started our capital budget meeting with a bit of a story, just talking about how blessed and fortunate we are from the moment we wake up to we lay down our heads with infrastructure, with services in this town. And certainly for operating, the focus is on services in a cost-efficient and sustainable way, prioritizing strategic investments in our staff and our systems and our assets as well. What I'd really like to show with this, and I don't have one, is not only just a photo of council, but really all of our staff who are tasked every day with carrying out the vision and the services to our community. So really want to give a great thanks to all of our staff who really truly implement this budget. And so coming back to council, your strategic plan is not new for this year, but certainly we're always trying to look back and reference that in ways that this is helping to accomplish that. We have different dashboards and systems of tracking that now as well. For anyone following in the presentation, each of those areas are linked here. So your strat plan is a major part, particularly as we look at the supplementary requests and things that are adaptive and responding to emerging needs as we look ahead to 2025. But your role in setting the plan is paramount. And then as well as we look at the next page, your role with budget planning through report CS07 that came forward back in the beginning of October to look at not just the timing, but summarizing and capturing a lot of the different pressures from year to year and for this year. I know we've often talked about this process, and you'll see evidence throughout our budget year of the different ways that this budget does come back and is continually worked on and approved and executed, and variance reporting quarterly to let you know how we're doing as well. Some themes with our long-term financial planning there, particularly in technology that we've been looking at the last couple of years, and then the role of our corporate subcommittee, which has discussions around in advance of releasing the budget reports in terms of also considering alternate funding, different targets, and limiting the overall tax increase, and also considering the way that our taxes are part of the overall tax bill with our partners, with particularly the region. This is an update of what our budget represents based on what was approved for 2024. It's just about, and that we would suspect, of course, next year that this would pass 100 million, but it's a $98 million in different funding and collections, offset a little bit by the fact that the levy budget itself of 45 million is contributing to our capital program. But there you get a sense of all the three budgets that we've been working on up until this point. So this graph is representative of the different divisions and departments of the town. It's a reflection of all the different detailed appendices you'll see in the council package that's on eScribe and available to anyone in the town as well that wishes to go through and look at a departmental and a divisional area for this to see what areas drive what percentage or what portion of the overall burden for the town. And again, just to reflect on the fact that when we bill our residents, we're tasked also with billing for the province for the education amounts at approximately 11%, and the region, which with their levy, which includes police and some of their social services and other different items listed on the left there, as well as transit, and then of course our own portion at approximately 43%. We update every year for the BMA study, which we believe is the best representation of comparing the most municipalities in Ontario. There's many different ways to compare ourselves, and you'll see that as different municipalities approve and pass their budgets and release media on that. But this is, we like to think, probably the most comprehensive in terms of detail and financial analysis for municipalities in Ontario by BMA. I encourage you, it is available through our financial services office if you wish to have a copy. There's an executive summary as well for Niagara. But in this case, we compare a like property in Niagara, and for 2024, Fort Erie had total taxes of $3,865, which is 12% below the Niagara average of $4,381. And we focus all of our presentations on the residential taxpayer. It's the largest assessment group. It's the largest population, of course. But it's important to note that all of the other key classification areas for taxes, be it other types of dwellings with 2 stories, multi-res, hotel, motel, and all those other areas, Fort Erie is below average for all of those as well. So this is a graph you've seen before, updated. I know I've said in the past, we've been at bottom or second lowest probably for the last, I'm going to guess 6 or 7 years, but you can see relative to the other municipalities in Niagara, and we do, I believe, have all 12 here represented with the average in the middle, around the middle there. You can see how Fort Erie, based on that provincial study, does fare and compare. And then the municipal burden, which we include as well with the water wastewater budget, Fort Erie this year, I believe we're about 3% below average, and that's a combination of not just tax that we're approving tonight, but the rate for the water budget. And important to note too, I mean, lots of variation in Niagara with municipalities across a whole host of areas, be it services and different offerings, infrastructure gap, and the different amount being contributed annually to those long-term needs. So there is lots of variation there, but I think given what we've reported to council and the community with where we are, particularly with the infrastructure gap, that is a good representation for us of where we're at. So for 2024, I can give some update. We're still in the process of doing a lot of the cutoff exercises we would have for identifying what amounts, if any, from last year's budget should be encumbered or accrued, what additional costs may still we have been committed to and still paying. But I can report we do have we've rebounded from last year, which had a larger deficit, to having a levy surplus this year, expected in the $1 to $1.5 million range, which is at or lower than some of our longer-term averages. We've been always committed to bringing those results with our audited statements to council to look at the best ways to apply any surplus that we're generating. Of course, any surplus, represents management's best efforts to not spend all monies that are budgeted, to maximize non-tax revenues, and a whole host of other things. So that's good news for the town that we then look at emerging needs. We've many years also contributed to our long-term capital asset needs with that as well. It's not a sustainable source, but it's a good source to help get us further along with that. And the most recent report would be the third quarter that Carly Griffin prepared, and we presented back in November with CS11. You would know some of these other reports annually. A summary at the bottom there of some balances that are key for the levy with both debt and reserves, which we compare quite favorably as well regionally for those. This is a summary of one of the provincial report cards. It's called a financial indicators summary report that we're provided annually. We just received this about 2 weeks ago, with both sustainability indicators and flexibility indicators. All of the green areas are areas that were performing better than the provincial average. Some of the ones like total taxes receivable, we've seen a slight trend in the last 3 years. That's higher than average, but we've seen averages on the whole in the last few years for the province increase also. So always managing that, mindful of that. We do have tax registration process and other key tools that we use for making sure that that's being addressed. So then looking at 2025, it contains the base budget, which is previously approved amounts. It's not always a hard and fast distinction with what we present in the base versus supplementary, but we do use that as a bit of a guide to highlight some of the key areas we think both council and the public should know in seeing separately. But the base budget is the areas that we need to continue our operations that are required legislatively, provincially, with our mandates and so on. You can see some of the drivers there, and the result this year of those overall base budget changes, and that's the bottom of Appendix 1, so not the whole picture, is 5.07%, which that amount is 7.16% less the tax assessment growth of 2.09. So we're going to get to looking what are some of the key changes within our base budget that are driving that approximately 5% increase. Those are identified and summarized in Appendix 1 and with commentary in the report as well. And the details again are in Appendix 3. And all of these are as well in the memo, the budget package section 7 that I mentioned earlier. And there again is just some commentary for anyone following along of how we present our budget, focusing, like Jen said, for the library on being informed as much as possible we report last year's budget and actual, but really in all our review meetings, it's the 2 prior years, looking for trends, and often going beyond that to look for historically what have been some of the anomalies with different environments, economies, and so on. But then as well, the 26 and 27 forecasts and the different categories and areas there that you will see presented in Appendix 3 for every divisional area. So for this year, the pressures and offsets for revenues are a net decrease to the budget of $143,000. Some of these include we've increased our business and short-term rental licensing by $30,000. That in part reflects the fact that we did lift the cap and would expect greater short-term rental licensing fees to go up related to that. We are increasing the budgeted revenues for building and planning fees by just over $250,000 for those 2 key areas. That's development driven. As well, a lot of these would be representative of the fee increases the council approved back on December 4th, I believe it was, for the overall fee, the annual fee review. So large impact, we talked at that time of the mix of trying to maximize fees that are benchmarked and reasonable within the community and across Niagara, but also trying to ensure that our fees are used properly to not overtax or to minimize or mitigate taxes as well. So some of those did have more than the 4% overall indexing. So you'll see in the next one, that's an example with $228,000 increases to other fees. That includes primarily facility rentals, with our beach and facility rentals there based on demand and our experience last year in particular. Also with cemetery fees, which have a plan to be increased and phased in to better recover costs in that area. So some really important results from that fee study and that fee approval to result in $228,000 increase there. Gaming licenses reflect the activity and trends with the licenses we collect on a number of different bingos in areas like that Grace Gress coordinates. Then we have net tax adjustments, which is a combination of both supplemental taxes or additional taxes we're receiving through the year as homes are coming onto the tax roll, and write-offs. We've seen, we've had years where the tax write-offs have decreased, particularly driven by the lack of a reassessment by MPAC, but supplemental taxes, overall, it's a net reduction from the experience we had last year where we believe that it will be coming down based on our estimates. The third last line, $300,000 increase in penalties and taxes is based again on last year's experience. Good news, bad news in a sense there. We are finding that many taxpayers are willing to wait longer, particularly when there's investment properties and so on. So that it's reflective of the trend for penalties and interest on tax arrears. The second last one is the largest of these, and as you would have heard possibly again this morning, with the falling interest rates, we are fortunate to have large investments and balances particularly with some of our long-term reserve needs. And that's a large hit based on what we're calculating with this report of $607,000. That does fluctuate from year to year. And then all other non-highlighted, all other non-tax revenue adjustments are an improvement or an increase in revenues of $123,000. This is a breakdown. 78% of our budget needs for our operations are raised by taxes, with 10% by user fees and so on. Then looking at expenses, similarly, just highlighting some of these, we have a number of wage and benefit increases with both the wages and benefits. There's a number of in-year changes that council would have been aware of as well. With the second line there, we had some reports that were promoting or approving positions related to them. We're fortunate to have a number of positions in place now early in 2025. They're quite exciting with community services, with some positions related to environmental and so on. So we've also increased some other hours for a number of areas with community health and so on. The capital amount was discussed in the capital report. We said we would be matching a prior commitment. That represents about 2% of the levy at $736,000. Again, transferring monies from our levy budget to our capital needs. Winter operations, there was a report that did come to council back in November or December, highlighting some of the renewal of contracts and the impacts there, which are reflected here at $124,000. Street lighting, it's a reduction, primarily because we're converting some of the street light maintenance program to a capital program. It meets all the thresholds, and based on the activities, especially the last 2 years, we're converting that to a predictable annual replacement program. So that's a reduction from the levy of $85,000. Our utilities overall, like you would have heard earlier, are a net increase of $110,000. And then IT maintenance, that's agreements, software security, a number of foundational and system enhancement areas that we've been targeting and moving forward on. Very thankful and glad to have John Hilbing as our CIO in our IT department, as well for the work that Reed Canavan did this last year with that group as well. But certainly as we're moving forward, as we're introducing an asset work order system that has costs, as we're integrating more and doing better with customer relationship management, there are impacts to that as well. Insurance is actually better than we had initially anticipated at a $95,000 increase. Debt is relatively stable. We had already forecasted for some of those changes, and really the primary changes were incurred in '24 when we issued the debt for the new, or for fire station number 4. Library, of course, as you heard earlier and saw that number in a report of $55,081 is the change in that grant request. Some slight changes to our tax increment grant program as we have the properties related to that come on board with actual assessment, then we can refine those. Grants and partnerships is an overall decrease of $82,000, and then the remainder of all that is just a smaller $13,000, all other expense net of reserve funding. And again, this is the breakdown with approximately 46% of the expenditures related to our staff and related complement, followed by materials and supplies. Not much to note here. I've kept this slide in, but as you may know from even the most recent Ontario Economic Update in the fall, the reassessment has been delayed again, and we don't know actually based on the wording if we can expect it for next year's budget either. It may be longer. They are doing a study of the what should be done related to that, because there will be major reassessment shifts, as I think many people know, where currently your taxes are based on an assessment dated January 2016. So that's very outdated, and we will have some very interesting challenges related to that. Jillian, I know you're watching. You're staying around, I think, until we have that new reassessment. And here's a comparison of our assessment growth history. So you can see last year we were quite fortunate in having 3.86% growth. This year it's come down to 2.1. This is noted in Jillian's report, CBC 05. We have a 5-year average across the 5 years of 2.4, so it's just slightly below average. We are at the mercy of the timing of how MPAC brings new assessment on for that. But that's tax revenue from all new construction. So this is a breakdown for both the revenue expenses I just touched on, using that assessment growth to show a net budget increase for the town of 5.07%. And then we'll just talk about, we have 8 items this year for supplementary consideration. I think it's actually the lowest in many, many years, I would say, in terms of additional items for consideration. We did have many discussions on trying to limit, knowing the pressures we had with this year's budget, to keep some of those requests as low or as few as possible. So we have 8 decision units related to that. That's on Appendix 2 of the report that identifies all those. Anything one time, this has been consistent for the last, I think, 10 years. That's how long I've been treasurer. For one-time requests, and then we'll look at how we've structured some of the base or the ongoing amounts as well. And just note that last year, just for frame of reference, we see we have amounts going into our reserves and some of our reserves building. We also use them, not every year is a rainy year, but we do use them regularly to help mitigate increases in any given year and stabilize them. So we have nothing in what typically would be our part 1 of the supplementary, which is things that have gone to council that have base costs. So that's a reflection on you as well in terms of anything that would have otherwise been brought to us as staff and requested to be brought as an ongoing budget need. So nothing in that part. Part 2, the only item is the Shirkston Road improvements. That's, again, we have in the memo package on eScribe and for council, a business case and commentary on each one of these. And this one in particular does comment on some of the benefits of making this change. It's a permanent closure between Point Abanow Road North and Missioner Road. So that is a $100,000 item, reserve funded. And then part 3, so then we have both ongoing new costs for part 3 and 4 separately. So in part 3, we have $127,000, and it's for 3 staffing positions, 2 of which are mitigated from alternate funding, again, in an effort to do whatever we can to support the staffing needs and pressures that we've identified, but look at other ways of funding and longer-term mitigation. So the first one is from Infrastructure Services for staffing for a supervisor of construction projects growth. Again, I encourage you to look at the supplementary form related to that to see what types of projects, what types of things are envisioned with that position. 65% of which we will allocate through our payroll functions to capital projects, which would then attract capital funding. So when you net those 2 out, it's the difference between the 92 and the 53,000 for levy impact. The second one there, 3.2, is staffing for a parks technician, arboriculture from Infrastructure Services as well, in relation to some of the tree needs we've discussed and identified for the town. That for this year, for not fully phased in, but for this year's portion would be 88,000. And then the last one is within PBBS. That's a permit application technician. That's within the building permit division. So that one would receive, due to the structure of that, having its own dedicated reserve and funding that can go to and fro, that we would aim to just have a net 0 impact with using building permit surplus reserve funding. So then we have for one-time costs, a facility condition study update. We did a condition study assessment, I believe it was 5-6 years ago, maybe more. That's to be funded with the facilities maintenance reserve. Town hall landscaping improvements, went through some different variations on what we could do to improve the image that's been many years for this facility on what the exterior looks like. So that's a combination of some internal design using some students and some materials and supplies for that project, funded by the Parkland Reserve. And then the last 2 are from PBBS, both a comprehensive zoning bylaw review and a community planning and permitting system, which is a requirement or a regulation from the province, a consultant to implement that new need. Both of those for $150,000. So once you factor in all of these, it adds, particularly with all the mitigating funding we have, only 0.37%, so that brings that 5.07 up to 5.44%. And again, this is presented just for the budget itself, not for any kind of assessment application. So if we look at, we show both on the right two graphs there, the base and the supplementary impacts. You can see our history, especially 20 and 21, where we were all hands on deck using as many reserves as we could to address a very difficult time. And then in recent years, so you'll see in the light blue, the town tax portion, so for the all-in 5.44 I mentioned is the far right light blue graph. And then with a dark purple, total town region education, that for when you factor in the regionally approved budget, which is offset a bit by the provincial education amount, which is unchanged, that's a 7.0% increase. This is just another graphical or a table version of that to see what those overall impact changes are. So you can see this is now looking at household impacts, which is based on the median assessment, which again hasn't changed. That number looks very low to anyone that's owned a house since 2016, but that is the basis on which the whole of the province is being assessed and billed. So you can see the town portion again there, both shown for both a median household assessment of $200,300, or I've shown it on the right there in the last 2-3 years for every increment of 100,000, so you can apply that more easily to your own circumstance. But it is a 5.33 combined with the 9.84 overall regional tax increase, which includes a transit portion that's higher than some of our peers. That would be a total 7.00% increase there. Again, here, this is showing the amounts. This is on a annual change. So for the median household, for the town portion, it's a $79 annual increase for the 5.33. And just to talk through some risks, only about 2 or 3 of these really have changed. There's many recurring things. Often they have their own story of what's changed within them. But inflation and economy, there's stabilizing factors there for sure. There's lots of unknowns and uncertainty in the year ahead with how the economy will be impacted by a whole host of political and economic factors. Lots of elections going on. Interest rates, again, have come down again today, so that does really impact us on both our investments and less so with debt, with no new debt being forecasted for this year. Labor costs, we are at the end of our previous collective bargaining agreement, which expired at the end of December. That was signed back in December of 2019, and much has changed, of course, in that time frame. So there's some risks and unknowns associated with that. Whether federal and provincial, we talk about risks with different grant funding sources and doing our best to advocate mostly on the capital side for funding, but that really does bolster and help our levy needs as well and our long-term planning for capital. So, and then assessment, we did talk about that, and then as well the regional taxes, we'll talk at the end about some of the timelines remaining for that. And then opportunities, a lot of effort, a lot of coordination amongst all our departments right now to bring our systems much further along. Very exciting time. We have some staff that are eager and hopefully for yourselves as well, not only from this last year, but coming up, you will see some of the benefits of that, as will our customers and those in the community. Fees and charges, we did take a little bit of a different approach this last year, and as we move forward, we're going to be ensuring that we are analyzing them wherever we can to ensure that where fees should provide for cost recovery, that they are, where there's an opportunity to consider a different fee for resident versus non-resident. That's been a recent conversation again. But to do what we can to maximize non-tax revenue. Of course, many shared service discussions and opportunities always being considered. We especially noted that on the water wastewater side, and then assessment base as well. Forecasts, We have base increases projected at this point of 8.5% for 2026, which we did have a larger number projected for 25 as well. So as you know, we do our best to mitigate that. Many unknowns a year out from now, with particularly on the interest rate again, which you saw was almost a 2% impact for us this year. So difficult to know exactly where we might be, and then some stabilization in 27 at 3.6%. We've included all the capital impacts. We talk about identifying maturing debt in the future and how that can help us. We do have, with the supplementary budget tonight, the 3 staff positions, again, they're mitigated, but to the extent that they are levy impacts, they would have phased in for a full 12-month impact for 26 of just over 46,000. And then again, market pressures that are various there. A summary of the timeline. So again, just what I mentioned earlier is that following, if council should approve the levy budget tonight, January 29th in the far right column, excuse me, we would have all the website updates and communications and bylaw come for February 24th. And then there's some other timing there for the policy, the ratios, which are a collective regional setting exercise, our own consolidated tax rate bylaw in May, so that we can get the 2025 tax bills mailed out by Jill and her team the first week of June. So the key messages are the base budget is a total increase, and this again now is for the median household of 4.9% for the base budget, not the total. That includes that assessment growth and 2% in capital funding. Supplementary budget items, that looks like a small typo. We just showed it as 0.37%. So the bottom line there really is the key impact for our tax bills for 2025, where for the town portion, it's a 5.33% increase, or $6.59 a month. For the total tax bill, 7%, or $19.80 for all amounts. We've structured the report again with all the different parts that need to have separate approval for grants and BIA levies, which are part of your package as well. We do have 2 new capital projects. We find at times that we will, in our capital program and timing, find things that are better, that should be added, and now is a good time to still do that. We can calculate some of the effects and so on. So we're adding the streetlight program I mentioned earlier of $130,000. That's with road refurbishing reserve funding, and also an emergency trailer, which follows some of our emergency experiences the last few years for $20,000. Again, this is the bottom of Appendix 2, just summarizing those impacts again clearly, so you can follow any one of those columns up through to see what's driving, what's impacting those rate changes. And that is it for my presentation. Thank you, Council. I'll turn it back to the Chair.
Thank you, Director Jansen, and thank you to your entire team for the outstanding work that you continue to do on behalf of the residents and this council. Questions to Director Jansen? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor Flagg, to Mr. Jansen. Thank you for your presentation, Jonathan. You commented a few times on the impact of the 2016, and that it hasn't been updated. Again, I'm trying to get my head around this, but it doesn't necessarily, even though individual assessments may change and the shifts in the, who's going to pay what, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the town expenses need to increase, right? Like basically, if we needed $10 million and 5 people were paying for it, they'd each pay $2 million. So if we still need $10 million and now there's 8 people paying for it. So it doesn't necessarily, I'm worried about the people who are listening to this saying, oh my God, the sky's going to fall. That it doesn't necessarily mean that the town's costs or the town's needs to provide the services are going to increase. Am I correct on that?
Yep, through you, Chair. You're absolutely right. That's a great comment. It's a great point to make, especially as things seem so out of joint with reality. We do have some resources on our town website, even a video from MPAC to describe that very thing. They simplified down to 3 homes making up one community. I would just say, our total assessment for the town, everyone's home could double next year, and our tax revenues would stay the same, so the tax rate would just come down. So it really truly is just the denominator on which we collect that same $36 million. So what you want to, of course, the issue becomes, the shift that I mentioned, is that you want to go up the average, or of course less than the average assessment increase, because if you're more, you will then naturally bear more of the burden. If you're less than the average increase, you'll bear less. So there will be lots of those shifts, which is the main concern. But you're right, if everyone's homes doubled, the amount of taxes that we would be raising, and therefore your tax bill would stay the same.
If I can continue, thank you for that. And I did see the video the last time I went to WEMO. So I know the video you're talking about, and I think it's actually available online, if I'm not mistaken, that people can actually go to understand it. My other question is in regards to some of the comparisons. If I wanted to see the whole picture, okay, we're talking about taxes today, but we're not talking about, I know we've talked about our water and wastewater billings, and we've talked about our development charges and things. Would it be helpful to see, okay, we're down here on, let's say, the taxes, but we're up here on water billing, and we're up here on development charges in comparison to other municipalities. And I'm just using this finger. There's no particular number in mind here. Is there any possibility that we can see how we compare tax-wise, water and sewer-wise, and forgot the third one, but development charge?
Yes. Yeah, so the BMA study I referred to has that and much more. So I can say when it comes to us presenting and requesting changes, proposing changes for our fees, and when anything that's other than indexing, we're asking staff to provide benchmarking to know, particularly what's highly comparable. Building permits is a great example where classifications are all fairly standardized. We want to know, and you'll see Keegan come forward and presenting on a percentage of total regional average where we fit in. So we do that. I know, for example, in the BMA study, there's not just for our water, wastewater, just the residential, but they will have, I think, 5 or 6 columns to explain everything from a 50,000 cubic meter per year commercial, 100,000 industrial, a 500,000 annual cubic meter, a whole host of different comparators for each municipality in the study. So there's those comparisons. The DC study, when we bring it forward, the slide that generally gets the most attention is how do we fit in? What does this look like? It's a 5-year study, so we tend to be, falling somewhere between someone else's 5 years, so those kind of jump around, but the short answer for that is yes, we would have comparators, and I know as other municipalities are releasing their own DCs, that'll often be forefront as well to show regional comparators. So if there's things in particular, we can talk about providing more of that to council and let you know.
Thank you for that explanation. But what I was hoping to see at some point is that I know we do it when we have the water and waste and we have a comparison. I know we do it when we have development charges, we have the comparison shown to us. And now we have the taxes and it's shown to us, but it's all kind of like in their own little silos.
Right.
It would be nice to know, see the whole picture at one time, like, okay, we're 23% lower than municipalities in this area, we're 35% increase in this area, and we're even in this area. So that if somebody's looking at this or not, I know the BMA study is about this thick. It would be hard for anybody to really kind of pull out that data, and I know that every year things change, and development charges change, and our water and sewer, and we vote on that, and we agree to the amount, but it would be helpful to the taxpayer to kind of see it, an overall complete picture, to say, okay, we're lower in taxes here, we're higher in water and sewer, and we're higher in development charges, something like that, so they see the whole picture, as opposed to, 3 months ago we did this, 5 months from now we're going to do that.
Yeah, so I'll just refer back, and of course I think you're talking about this slide in particular, slide 10, that does compare us for the two bills that are not discretionary for nearly every property in Fort Erie. So if you want to know certainly what the town is going to be billing you for and how we compare with those, because there would be a lot of discretion with DCs and for the users to be saying, yes, I'm going to be building a new home or not, or other fees that are discretionary, we say, because the user can decide how often they want to use or access or require that fee. So this one does compare the two, and I would say it's the best representation of trying to address that need, but we can always look at, it's just difficult to layer on other one-time and discretionary fees on top of this.
I can appreciate that. My last question, it goes in regards to, because we have water and waste over here, and some of the water and waste is collected through individual billing or residential billing and that. But some of our water and wastewater is also kind of a generalized, what the town spends, what the fire department spends, and things like that. Do other municipalities, I know the government says, okay, you're supposed to bill it separately, the individual's supposed to pay what they use, or like a user rate. But if I can recall, it wasn't that long ago that some of the municipalities weren't doing that. Their water bills were artificially lower, and they would be moving, the expenses would be the same, but they would be moving some of that burden onto the tax rate. Is that still happening, or is that?
I'm only aware of one municipality. There's one municipality that doesn't have Niagara water wastewater system, that's Waynfleet, but I do show in my water wastewater presentation that issue where we remove Grimsby because there still is a reliance on taxes to fund the wastewater side. There is a plan to change that, I'm aware of. But in that presentation, back on December 4th, I also do show the max and min for base charges and variable, because you're right, some weight much more to having a variable charge and very little on the base or fixed charge, and conversely, some are the opposite. So some would have moved to having 100% wastewater fixed charge, so there's no representation or charge for any kind of consumption. So there is a whole myriad of different ways of doing that.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you to Mr. Jansen. Thank you very much for your presentation this evening, and I'm sure you'll convey our appreciation and thanks to all your staff and everyone who helped put this budget together. It's something we all look forward to on council, and I can imagine the amount of work that you guys have to put into it to bring it to us. I'm just going through your slide deck here, and you've got some excellent charts. Like I'm looking at slide 7, where it just kind of breaks down the breakdown of your provincial education side, the regional tax side, and the town tax side. And one of the things that I run into quite often, just speaking with individuals, is I don't want to call it a lack of understanding, but an inability to contextualize what each portion of their tax bill funds. We all know that there's a regional portion, there's a local portion. Some individuals don't realize that, there is a provincial portion on that. And so I'm just, spitballing this out here just as an idea. Is there any way, maybe when we send out the initial bill at the beginning of the year, to maybe include like a supplemental sheet or something like that with the bill that has these charts and kind of the breakdowns explaining what they are? I know that there might be a cost for that, for the additional piece of paper and getting it into the envelope, but with what I hear, and it's if they come to us, we can point them in that direction, but how many people don't, and how many people don't understand? So I'm just throwing that out there, if that's something possibly we can do, because it's great info.
Yeah.
Director?
Yeah, no, you're right. I know, and we of course, there's only so much a budget night presentation will get traction. We do put out media releases and social media as well, but we have often said there is limited kind of apparent awareness with inserts and so on, which people easily throw out, but we will consider that again. The bill itself, of course, does show it, and we have some descriptive areas at some point with our finance systems as well. As you know, we're going to be moving to a different system, which may give us greater options other than putting an insert, but we will take that back and look at that again.
Anything further?
Nope, that's it. Thank you very much.
Your worship.
Thank you. I want to thank you for all the work that you've done on this, and your staff, and I know that you've been working on this for many months, and I would just like to go through your presentation and maybe start at slide 7, which Councillor Dubanow just referenced. And out of that 37.6 million that goes to the upper tier, I presume around 3 million is what we send for transit? I think it's going to be 3.1 million in '25.
You are probably better with that number off the top than myself, yes. It's actually just around 4.1 million, I believe.
Right, so it was, for '24, I guess it was
3.2, yes.
because it's gone up
Yep.
900,000. And can't help but wondering whether we could maybe spend that $4.2 million better ourselves, because we haven't really gotten so far out of the transit what we were hoping. Anyways, that's a comment, and I apologize, Chair. I'm going to move on to questions. When everyone's agreeing. Yeah. Oh, that's why I like you folks. You agree with me sometimes. On slide 10, I was just wondering, and Councillor Noyes has raised a good question, and you'd mentioned about the Grimsby situation where we see what their taxes are, but if their water and wastewater and taxes are mixed in, then the burden that they show on slide 9, which is just taxes, would include the water and wastewater, so it's somewhat misleading.
Slide 9 is just tax.
So,
But it would exclude the portion that's a good question, yeah. Whether or not it would exclude the portion in the study that relates to supporting the water, the wastewater, yeah.
so if I just get clarification, Chair, so some of Grimsby's water and wastewater expenses come from rates, but they subsidize that from their taxes, is that the situation?
That's right, wastewater.
So then they would still have two amounts that could be referred to. One is their tax amount, and then one is their water, wastewater amount, is there not?
Yeah, I'm just seeing if I can actually pull that up quickly. Well, even in that, I have it hidden for the purposes of that graph, but if I go to that graph and unhide it, I probably could have that number somewhat quickly if I do things right here.
Yeah, so nothing really hinges on that from my perspective. What I was interested in knowing is, in terms of the taxes and rates, and we see that Fort Erie is still, I guess, probably close to West Lincoln and then higher than the other two. But do we have any data? Is there any data that would reflect what the state of the water, wastewater infrastructure is as part of an asset management program? Because is that broken out anywhere?
So the state of our asset management plan that would have come forward in July had comments specifically on those separate categories. We're actually in the process right now of preparing our once every 5-year drinking water quality management system financial plan that the province requires. That's scheduled to come to council on February 10th, and that refers again back to the water and wastewater components of that. But we would have had some of that information in our water presentation. Just don't have that right now.
My question is directed towards, how do we know how we fare with other municipalities? Is there any data that shows what each municipality is doing and where they stand in terms of infrastructure gap on these various categories?
Do you want to toss that to CEO?
Sure, yeah.
Through you to the mayor's question, the exercise that we've gone through with the asset management plan has or will set more equal measures and parameters on how assets are measured. So the exercise that we've gone through that we reported on earlier this year, other municipalities would be reporting similarly. And so in the past, the data quality has always been a little bit of a question about how people evaluate the state of their assets was done differently. Some was purely based on age, and what's happening now is more refinement around the actual condition of the asset, not the age. And so once the province receives all the asset management reports from the municipalities, I suspect either through the FIR, which is our financial reporting, or through the report that Mr. Jensen's referred to, BMA, I suspect they'll start reporting on that as a comparator because it'll be a more reliable data set collected using the same formulas and the same criteria for assets. So I think as we go forward, that kind of information will be much more available and comparable.
Thank you.
I would just maybe add to that briefly too. So it's a great question, and it's something that we've been asking for. We were hopeful, in fact, that with all the OREG requirements, the Ontario regulation requirements for the asset management plan, that they would then that would result in additional reporting that we would welcome for sure. But with our financial information return, to have some of that comparison so that it could flow through, like Mr. McQueen said, through to the BMA study and so on. I would have some informal commentary from our peers in Niagara of, just to say some of the larger municipalities, when you look at a percentage of levy contribution to capital, I know a couple of the larger ones would be more in the 10% range. There's lots of ways to slice that as well with, do you factor in to what extent they have debt that's committed to capital or just their levy contribution. Of course, their grant you receive in any given year is all over the map as well. But when you look at core sustainable reserve capital funding, we are at around 30%, and it is triple of what some others are. Again, granted, there's different needs, there's different makeup and age of municipalities that would set different needs. Not to say that we're 3 times ahead of others with where we should be. It's all there's a lot of variation. So, but that was one interesting insight into the fact that municipalities are giving very different amounts to the long-term needs.
You mentioned, Mr. Jansen, that the surplus for 2024 is going to be in the $1 to $1.5 million range. That's all money that is directed towards various reserves or to some special projects that we're contemplating, or strategic projects that we've contemplated doing if we had the money?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So I did mention it earlier briefly, but we will consider that for ideally for one-time needs that are strategic or emerging. We do bring those forward every year. Of course, last year was the exception when in August we brought forward the audited statement but had a deficit. So our general levy rate stabilization reserve funded that deficit last year. But then in other years, we'll look to everything, and it's discussion with council as well, everything from reserve targets to additional capital needs to additional operating needs or one-time needs that have emerged in the middle of the year. Lots of different options there.
And do you know offhand what the balance is in our general levy rate stabilization fund is?
I do. And maybe before I do that, because I had another spreadsheet open, I do have the total for Grimsby, and I can tell you that Fort Erie is is lower than that amount as well, just slightly lower. But for the general levy rate stabilization, so there is I would just caution, we'll still work to know how much of what we budgeted with those reserve funds would still need to be transferred to some of those projects that we budgeted in the 2024, things like that. But the opening 2025 balance is projected to be $1.7 million. So we have a target of 5 to 10% of our levy. So that would be anywhere from 1.8 million to $3.6 million as a best practice. Many municipalities refer to that. So it's just below that target.
Thank you. And then on page 12, slide 12, we've got the total taxes receivable. Is that number for Fort Erie going up or going down over the last few years?
I Do you have a trend analysis on that one too? I can look up fairly quickly in one of my folders here. I would say, and it's quite consistent for the average as well, that since 2020, that number has been going up. To what extent, I could find out somewhat quickly, but yeah, that has been a trend. We were down at one point in the, well, I'm not going to even guess right now because I'm close to having it here. So we were at a low in 2021 of 5.2%, 7 and 8.1% the last 2 years. 8.3%. You may realize or not that we did pause and slow significantly our tax registration program, as many municipalities did during the pandemic. So that would have had an impact as well. And I can just share that when we were 5.2, the provincial average was 5, and that went up to now it was 5.6. I'm looking at the median. The average that we report here was, we were below the average in 2021. Now we're 1.2% above average in 2023. This is all based on 2023 audited results.
If I might, Chair, so are we taking steps now to try to bring that down?
Yes, you will see, and there will be indications, and we've already sent out in the fall some notices already of intent to initiate the tax registration program for properties.
Is there an intention to become a bit more assertive in that program?
Certainly more assertive than we've been the last 3 years, but yes, the intent is for us to return to normal with that. We do have the benefit of a third party that helps us coordinate that. It's a firm called RealTax, but we will be returning to what we would consider regular, normal level of work on that to lower that number.
Okay, thank you. And if I might, Chair, on the next slide, 13, talks about the overall base budget change, 5.07. You throw in whatever it is, 3.7 or something. You have two numbers on slides 30. You have a 5.33 levy increase. On slide 28, you've got a 5.44 levy impact. What's the difference between a levy impact and a levy increase?
So I don't have it as a full description of all of them here, but the Appendix 2 is really the one at the bottom of Appendix 2 when you move through all of those columns, and maybe I would just go to the end where it does show all those different rates, and then I can just move quickly through those. But so column 1 is the total dollars that are required for the tax levy. The second column, that's how much year over year the budget is increasing. So from 34.6 million last year to the 36 million this year, net of assessment growth. The next column over, that 5.33, and this is where we are throwing a lot of numbers out. But that is now taking the 5.44 and presenting it for the median household. So there's a slight variation there when you factor in all the different tax rates that are estimated for all the different components of the bill. Then column 4, 7%. Again, that's now adding in the region and the education, the 46 and the 11% of the graph. And to come up in the last column, the total for all amounts that our citizens are receiving, including our 42%, was it? $19.87. So that's how those all break down.
So if I might, Chair, if the town bill percentage increase is 5.33, but the town budget increase is 5.44, that means some taxpayers will pay more than 5.33, will they not?
Yeah, this is a difficult one to describe. No, I think it would hold true that all households, regardless of whether you're above or below the median, would be experiencing the 5.33% change overall.
Okay, so then my real question was, you're at 5.33. The target earlier in 2024 was 4.95. Have you considered what you would need to do to get the tax increase from 5.33 to 4.95?
Yes, we did look at some additional options, and the alternatives of the report would talk about what amounts would be required to move it, to increase or lower. I know at times we've talked about presenting an amount that would grow it because we're actually falling behind on capital needs, but to lower it to get below 5, I know I did check to see that $120,000 in either savings on our expense side or increases to our revenues would get us to $499. So I assume it would be about an extra $140,000 to get us to $495.
Okay, and in the next slide, you indicate that the bank and investment income is going to be about $607,000 less in 25, you project, than it was in 24.
That's right.
And we're hiring more individuals. And on the one slide, I guess it'd be let me jump to slide 26 if I might share. Slide 26 is the slide that talks about the budget supplementary positions. I'm not really sure that I understand why we'd be hiring people whose costs are going to be part of the base, but we call it supplementary. What's the explanation for that?
So it's, and I was admitting as much earlier that we do try and transparently show as many of these changes to our overall commitments to council where we think we should. And with the staff complement, we have and we do make changes at times during the year, but annually with the opportunity to do this, we did want to present these as having long-term impacts for council to be aware of. The supervisor of construction projects, we've noticed some impacts on our ability to complete and to get projects completed. So we could argue that that is a requirement to continue with our operations, therefore we should just include it in our base amount on Appendix 1, not show it separately as on Appendix 2. But showing it as a supplementary, it does allow for each of these to clearly communicate some of the expectations, some of the accountabilities. At times there's related fees or funding, so it does allow us to go into a little bit more detail for each of those.
And I know that there's an explanation for all of these positions, and I appreciate the fact that there's been a lot of construction ongoing, some major projects in the town. I appreciate that there's a need for an ability to let the inspectors inspect and others can review plans and what have you. What happens if construction goes down? And do we have any type of plan where we review periodically whether all of the employees are needed, whether we review if there's a vacancy because somebody leaves? We take a look and see whether it's necessary to continue that position or not. Is that something that we have in place?
Yeah, through you, Chair. We did last year, and we have in recent years undertaken some organizational reviews, some realignment of divisions and departments. We went through some changes where even, of course, with the amalgamation of transit, we did review what the impacts of that would be. And it is incumbent upon us as directors and as CAO to be regularly reviewing what those needs are. I don't know, CAO, did you want to comment further?
Thank you, through you. So we have had some discussion at our directors level meeting and have engaged our Director of Human Resources, Ms. Damon, on the process. So what you've identified is, I guess, a vacancy review is one of the things we've implemented and will be implementing. So all vacancies that come about as a result of whatever, whether someone's left or moved to another position. Those vacancies are now pulled, reviewed, and they're sent to me, so I sign off on all staffing requisitions, regardless of the level in the organization, and it's for the purposes of us as directors to look at positions to see if those positions have changed, whether the demands have changed, whether duties can be allocated, reallocated, or reviewed for necessity prior to filling the positions. And, you know, Jonathan's talked about some of the realignment that was done was to address existing positions to try and realign duties of existing staff. So it's not happening just when positions vacate, but also sort of ongoing and going forward. And the truth is, if the positions aren't required at some point in the future, we're going to have to make a tough decision to rationalize those positions and remove them from the complement.
Okay, well, that's encouraging, and I think the residents expect that type of rigorous review of your manpower. Because in my mind, and you can tell me whether this is a correct line of thinking, we generate revenues through development processes and building permits. And that's revenue that we typically utilize to help cover costs with respect to building, and that would be inspections and permit reviews, what have you. If those revenues go down, that would typically be a reflection of a reduction in that type of activity. And so therefore, the revenues go down, we don't need the same amount of manpower. Is that connection accurate or too fuzzy?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the difficulty is, and what I found in my years is we tend to be quite reactive to staffing. It's very difficult to get in front of and anticipate where we think the market might be going, because of course we're committing town taxes, precious taxes, to those needs. You should know that with each one of these, we did consider whether or not there could be a temporary measure or, some other alternative funding to be considered with them. Of course, that has concerns as well with attraction and retaining people, and, losing a temporary person that may spend 6 months in this role temporarily this year, only to find that, you're not able to retain or attract good people going forward. So there's a whole host of considerations there. We would have a couple areas where we have only included this year some, in our base budget, some partial hour allocations to temporary positions. We have used students where possible, in a few instances this last year where we have identified variances where it makes sense, where we were not losing, or we're trying to test the waters and see really what can be done to deal with what may be shorter term or longer term needs, and just to be cautious with overcommitting the town.
Okay, and just finally, the permit application technician, that's a position where there's somebody in a casual role right now, so hence half of the salaries of this new position is being covered by an existing casual position.
That's correct.
I think I'll wait till the report comes out, but I'm thinking that if 8.5% is what you're projecting for 2026, we need to start working on the 2026 budget. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Yep. Thank you, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Flagg, to Jonathan. Jonathan, a few months ago, and I don't have the exact number, we talked about, I think it was around $7 million that was going to be put back into reserves from projects that were either discontinued or they were less expensive than we had planned for. So I'm just wondering, how has that I'm using $7 million as I think it was close to $7 million, affected this budget or perhaps next year's budget? I know we put it, is it pretty much all going to go to asset management, or does it offset any of these?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. That was brought forward and commented on. We brought that report in October, just in advance of the November capital report. So we did extensive work to try and close as many uninitiated or projects that were closed and completed projects, but there was a number of uninitiated that we said, in particular with turnover, with infrastructure services and other areas, we said we would close those, rebudget those going forward. So some of them may have future needs that really truly haven't gone away. We would expect in the course and the rhythm of our capital reserve use that annually there are funds being returned with surpluses, mostly surpluses with our capital program. So really that's one-time funding that we tend to rely on with our long-term capital needs. So that 7 million was returned with the closure of 67 projects back to all the respective capital reserves. And I know in at least a few instances, it resulted in bringing back a $2.5 million trenchless program that was something that had been shuttered. So it was, it was rebirthed just, weeks later.
Thank you very much.
All good? All right, thank you, Jonathan. That'll bring us to reports. And 6.21 is response to inquiry, Redekop. I'm just trying to, I guess it really doesn't go on the floor, it's just a response.
Yeah, I just want to say that I appreciate that information. That certainly responds to my question about what the life cycle costs were. I know that Councillor Lewis had also asked for additional information. I think much of it's contained in here, but yeah, very helpful. So I appreciate that from staff.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the mayor stole some of the words right from my mouth. I was going to say the same thing. One of the other additional questions I had was on page 2 of the memo. It mentions both on-street and parking lots to maximize prime day revenues. And my question is, do we have other paid lots within the municipality with the exception of the ones referenced in this report? And I guess part of that question would also be, do we charge at the other locations if they exist? And I'm not sure who to ask that to because Director Walsh is not here this evening, but
I'll look behind me here.
Thank you through you to Councillor Lewis. Mr. Walsh did notify me that he had a personal reason for not attending, bereavement related. So he apologizes for not being here, but I'll do my best to answer the question. The question about other parking lots, we are intending to look at that. So the memo references a March report coming back because there are other locations that we may look to consider. The Bay Beach one is probably the most historical or structured program that we have in place in terms of parking fees. So it was the easiest one we had data to look at. So that will be looked at. So the memo that's before you references just those specific parking lots.
Councillor Lewis.
yeah, push buttons tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, CAO, for that response. And I guess the other question, I don't need it tonight, is it mentions overnight parking. And I just want to make sure that if we're looking at lots within the Bay Beach area and Crystal Beach, surely we're going to look at all municipal parking lots potentially for overnight parking. I can't imagine Crystal Beach being the only spot that requires parking at night.
Under advisement?
Yes, that would be addressed in the March report. Absolutely.
Thank you. And then last just comment, while I can appreciate the revenue needed from Bay Beach to offset some of the costs for Bay Beach, it's always been my understanding that Bay Beach was meant to be cost recovery, not necessarily cash cow. But I do have some concerns about, from a business point of view, increasing some of the rates for, and I'm not saying it's not a bad idea to look at offsetting the costs with increasing parking, but there is some concern amongst the business community that if it's already hard to get some people off the beach to go and shop in the establishments, and now we're charging more for people to park in that location. And I get why we're looking at doing that. I just want to throw that out there for consideration. And those are my only comments, but I appreciate the report. It's a lot more thorough, provides certainly more options for us than what was given, and I'm glad that it appears we're moving from what we were given as an original option to something that I think is a bit more of sound mind. Thank you.
Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Flagg. On the same thing on Bay Beach, and again, it's been a while, but did the region not contribute money to this project? Like $1 million or something?
800. 850,000.
I don't see that in the breakdown. Unless I missed it.
I'm looking. Anyone? Anyone?
Well, that's not the town's
I,
revenue.
I suppose by default, that one comes back to me, but we'll have to look into that to see whether it was included in that total or whether that was over and above in terms of the amortization amount.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to that point, I mean, the memo refers to $3.3 million redevelopment, which would have included the 850 or whatever it was from the region. But whether that's part of the calculation with respect to the life cycle recovery, I don't know.
Okay, we'll get that information. Anything else? Yes, go ahead.
We're directed to have a rate of calculate that part of that.
Well, there's a report that's supposed to be coming forward in March, so I don't think we're going to vote on change here until we know what's in the report. I think we're stuck with that. You're going to have to come up with, yeah. Sorry, Chair.
Councillor Christensen.
One of the concerns, and this is with the Bay Beach report, on page 2 in the table, I note that, forgetting 2001 to 2018, but 2019 to 2024, where there's an itemization of revenues, in terms of assessing what the net surplus per year is and to do an extrapolation going forward on the current base, I find it a bit difficult. So I'm wondering if it's possible to break out the pandemic years, because there were significantly lower revenues during the pandemic years. So that's just concerns me, and I'm just asking if that could be incorporated into the assessment. So essentially 22 to 24 are clean years in terms of assessment of net revenue deficit, not 2019 to, or, well, especially 2020 and 21. So.
Director Jansen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, so that'll move us then to CBC 05-2025. Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. That's on the floor for discussion. Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Opposition? Passed. Carried. And CBC 06, 2025.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Discussion. No, Your Worship.
Chair, I'm good with everything here, and I do want to say that the assessment report was well done. I'm good with everything that's being proposed by staff. We've gone through this. There've been a number of meetings within the corporate services to review what's being proposed. My only issue is Part 8, which I'm pretty firm in wanting the increase to be below 5%. And so I don't know what the number would be to get this down to 4.95%, instead of 36,959. Right, and I would be content that come out of the base budget. I'm fine with what's being proposed for the supplementary budget. So that's that would be, if you know the number, that's my amendment. That I would like to move an amendment on that, Chair.
Do you have a number?
Yeah, so we will commit then to identify some of my more recent discussions, these revenue areas where we revenues to bring the total total would then become $824,000, of which the base would be $36,696,075.
Thank you.
Good.
So that would, and then in terms of the last slide that we did review, the columns, that's the budget. That would mean that again, I would just focus on the meetings instead of 5.3, 4.95%.
Okay, discussion on the amendment then. None? Okay, all those in favor? Opposition? Carried. Moving on, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Flagg. Just a few comments. First is on the Part 2 with the $100,000 for Shirkson Road permanent closures. It costs what it costs. I understand $100,000 is usually the benchmark. But the other side of the coin is that we are saving money too, in regards to we're not going to have to resurface the road, we're not going to have to plow the road. So even though it's $100,000 in the supplemental budget, on the other side of the coin, we are saving money, and over the years, we're ahead of the game. I just wanted to mention that the other thing is, in Part 3, the arborist, I think, I'm calling it an arborist. I'm assuming that's what we're calling it. It's called an arboriculture. Are we hiring an arborist? Or parks
CEO?
technician? Arborist.
Okay, Director?
Oh, sorry. I would just have the information here mostly that's from the Section 8 page.
Just tells me.
Maybe we can throw that to the CAO.
It's Section 8 where that describes the nature.
Gotta speak louder.
Sorry.
CAO can.
CAO, we're going to try to let him get this one.
Thank you, through you. I was navigating through the same document Mr. Jensen was, so he may be faster to the button for me. But the position is intended to address a number of tree and tree-related issues. We've just done a natural asset inventory, and now we know we've got somewhere in the order of 14,000 trees across the town that require us to continue to monitor and upkeep that. And with us falling somewhat behind with tree planting in a number of other areas, development related and some unrelated to the development, it's a position that we think is in the town's best interest to address a number of tree related issues, maintenance, operations, and would work with our current arborist more in a junior role to support us. And we do outsource quite a lot of arborist type work because we just don't have the capacity internally, and this may be an opportunity for us to bring this position on and look at reducing some of the more minor maintenance type things that would normally be outsourced to a more expensive option.
Councillor Noyes?
Currently, do we have an arborist on staff already?
Through you to Councillor Noyes, yes, we do.
So now we're going to have 2.
That's correct. So we'll have an arborist, and this would be, I suppose you'd refer to it more as a junior arborist.
Okay. And if I heard you correctly, we have 14,000 trees that need attention, I think is how you put it, or care or something?
Sorry, through you, just to clarify, when we did the natural asset inventory, we inventoried all of the trees that are on town-owned properties. So there's quite a number of trees, and on an ongoing basis, and this wouldn't be annually, but there will be a regular cycle where we'll have to reevaluate trees within our inventory. They're sometimes done in blocks, or they'll be done in, sections, but it's more to keep pace with the condition of the trees and anything that we would need to know about to ensure that they're being maintained properly, depending on where they are and whether there's any hazards related to those trees. But it's keeping the inventory, the state of the trees up to date.
And thank you for that. So, okay, the way I first heard it was that there are 14,000 trees in need of something. But basically the 14,000 trees are like all the trees on towns. Some may be perfect, many, probably the far majority are healthy. We're just going to have just keep assessing this to maintain the health. Like I'm in the emerald or, we had a huge problem a few years ago with that. So, okay, I can appreciate that. Now we still have this tree bank, so that's not included in any of the dollars necessary for the 14,000 trees we're going to keep an eye on.
Through you to Councillor Noyes. So our current operating budget would account for our regular ongoing and maintenance of our tree stock and any of the work that we have planned. So that would be accounted for within the existing budget that you have before you.
And if I can continue, I would imagine that this individual or the arborist or the assistant arborist would be the ones that would then go and visit a resident who wants to take down a tree to see if it's...
CEO?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. I have another question then on the second, I guess it's on part 4. I see about $90,000 for town hall landscaping improvements, funding by the Parkland Reserve. Okay, and I realize it's Parkland Reserve that's coming out. But my concern, I don't know if it's a concern, but I guess a comment then, is that I always thought the town hall looked pretty good. But I will tell you, and I mean this not to disparage anybody, but when I look at Stevensville Library, when I look at Ridgeway Library, and I would look at Centennial Library, their landscaping, in my opinion, and I'm not a landscaper, is, if on a score of 1 to 10, I'd give it about 2. So if we're going to be spending $90,000 on landscaping improvements, I think perhaps we have to look at not just the town hall, because I do agree that we have to have a good public image, and it's important. But if you compare what we currently have at Town Hall to what we have in front of our libraries, there's a huge difference in need. So I would, if we're going to spend $90,000, I think we have to spend it in the best place possible. Thank you.
Your Worship.
Yeah, just on that point, I'm wondering, the libraries are all adjacent to a park, and I'm wondering whether the landscaping for the libraries is part of the landscaping costs relative to those parks. So whether it's Crystal Ridge or Stevensville Memorial Park or the Sugar Bowl, I'm wondering whether that's part of a budget there.
CEO, is that something you can answer?
So I know the challenge that we've been facing over the last number of years is a lot of the landscaping designs and landscape plantings that have happened at some of our newer facilities has been rather labor intensive to maintain. And so part of this is starting to look at, and the town hall property will be one, looking at low maintenance, high aesthetic design options and redoing the landscape on a number of areas. And we've looked at this one and we think there's an option. We've got some very skilled staff that need an extra set of hands. So we're looking at students and other options, less expensive options than outsourcing again to landscape companies to have the work done internally and start looking at replacing some of the higher maintenance, maybe overgrown areas around the town hall, particularly on the backside of the building here, and replacing them with low maintenance options that will lower the cost over the longer term. And you're absolutely correct, Councillor Noyes. I take a note of several civic pride projects across the municipality that are landscape related, and we would like to start checking them off as we go. And we haven't had the ability to provide the extra set of hands for the libraries to maintain some of their landscaping, but it's certainly something that's on our list.
Councillor Noyes?
And I appreciate that answer. And like I said, people may disagree with me, but I look at the library entrances and there's little, if anything. So they're really no maintenance because there's nothing to maintain for the most part. But anyway, and a good example would also be in the regards to Stevensville. We've had a cracked concrete sign for how many years? The sign's been cracked, maybe 2. So I guess somebody looked like somebody backed into it or whatever. It's been cracked. I think the staff did their best to try to stick it together. Well, it's apart again. So I have a problem with seeing $90,000 going towards the town hall. And I think the town hall, I think this is considered a park, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure it is considered a park, like the stormwater management pond and the bridge that goes over it. I think it's all considered part of a park. But anyway, I'm hoping that when we're going to spend the $90,000, we concentrate on low maintenance, absolutely, but we also look at where the greatest need is. It doesn't necessarily have to be limited to town hall. Thank you.
Other comments? Okay, Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just a few comments. I want to mention again, just thanking staff for all the work they put into this. Director Jansen, CAO McQueen, the department heads, Anamika Delaria, and Kelly Walsh and their teams. They all come together and they put this budget together, and it's always very appreciated. It's very time intensive. And it's, the one big thing that we have to look at as a council every year to set tax rates. And, during my first term at council, when we first came in prior to COVID, the increases were small. I think we had 1 year where it was even a decrease. We had good assessment growth. Inflation was under control. Those decisions were really easy. Like you come in here, you're presented with a budget, looks really good. We vote on it. We went home, and that was the end of it. It's become much more of a challenge years moving forward. Particularly the last few post-COVID years, and it's something that I often lament about. And I struggle with because I look at the work that the staff do, and I look at what our municipality does, and I look at my council colleagues here, and I know we're all doing our best, and I have no doubt about that. And I know that there's also a lot of upward challenges that we're facing that are outside of our control that are leading to these spending increases. So it's one thing that I think I said it last year. And I'm going to say it again this year, just for residents who are listening. This is not something I take flippantly. I look at this, I struggle with it. I understand that, it's expensive to raise a family these days. It's expensive to run a household. Lord knows I deal with that myself, with my own family, and I'm going to be paying the same property tax increases as everyone else. I think Mayor Redekop raised some excellent points about the need for what we're doing. I think it's also very good that we look for ways to kind of cut this back and use some revenue tools to our advantage to get it down a little bit. I'm going to be voting and supporting this in favor because I think we are doing a good job as a council. I think we're, very efficient in what we do. I think we're very thrifty in how we spend, particularly compared to other levels of government that, seem to spend like drunken sailors, in my opinion. So that's all I wanted to say. Just that residents know that these are not easy decisions. They aren't rubber stamps. It's something we look at internally. We're always looking for ways to ensure that residents get the best value for the dollars they pay. And I wish it was 2019 again, where I think it was a 0.3% decrease that year, and inflation was only, 2% at that time. Those were interesting days, made my decisions easier. But, we're in the seat for a reason. We're here because the residents trust us to make good judgment. And I think this is good judgment this evening to pass this. So thank you very much for the latitude, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Councillor McDermott.
Just a brief comment. I know where Mr. Jansen started in this process, and it was in the double digits. So we've come a long way since then. And the mayor adding in to try to get this down to around 4.95 is noble, and I thought I would go there tonight too. But I just want to say how this staff has really worked diligently over the whole year to get to where we are today. And with the challenges of huge regional increases on a regular basis, it doesn't make it any easier. So, the work that you put into this is substantial. It's probably one of the best budgets I've seen. So, yes, we try to keep them low, and we did. We've had, I think, four years in a row where they were really low. So even with that, we're still fighting on behalf of the taxpayer to get it even lower. I just want to say one thing, that we should never, ever take that easy route where we don't check and double check things, because, we will turn into regional council if that's the way it's going to be. Sorry about that, Your Worship. Wasn't blaming you. Somebody's got to sit at the head of that table. But, the taxpayers aren't just a pawn for money. Getting service for your dollar is the toughest thing you could do nowadays. Just look at transit. We bought a pig in a poke, and that's what we got. So, things like this really kind of damage reputations of politicians. And you can never make up for that sort of stuff. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to always be wary about who pays the freight, who can pay the freight, who can't pay the freight. We're not all of one income. So I appreciate the mayor's note on, trying to get this down to 4.95. I think that's pretty reasonable. And I thank Jonathan for, anticipating these things. So I'll be supporting this budget wholeheartedly tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. Councillor Christensen.
As I think if all of you know, I've sat on the other side. I've been the staff many years ago. And one of the things that I always respected among the people whom I worked with at the time, and what I respect now is the degree of integrity, rigor, and discipline that was brought to this process by the staff who worked on it and by the councillors who advised and worked with staff to bring in this budget. It's actually an honor to work with all of you. This is, I read the numbers very, very carefully. I read the additions very carefully, and I was impressed with the rationale for each of the changes and the fact that although one might question, do we really need it? The answers were there, yes, we do, that it will forward the municipality. It's also respectful, as I think Councillor McDermott has said, of our citizens who pay the taxes that support the town. So I will be supporting the budget, and again, I would like to thank you for the work you've done.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I was scribbling things as other people were saying things to not make the same comments, but I just want to thank the mayor for his amendment to the motion and getting us to the 4.5 and the work that staff has done, and that's been, or 4.95. That's certainly a lot of work has gone into this, but I just want to say certainly frustrated with the fact that we continue to be fiscally responsible to keep taxes low or in check, but while at the same time not passing a burden onto a future generation. And also frustrated and continue to be frustrated, as I know all of us are, with the region, and that is by no means a slap to Regional Councillor Encina or the mayor for the good efforts that they've done at budget, and while they continue to get the region to come to their senses in many cases. And then lastly, I just want to mention that when a community is growing, I think it's imperative that we continue to invest in the community. Our community is growing. We are continuing to invest in it. And it will be nice when we ever get to a point where we have some provincial support or some regional support so that we can quit taking things off of the to-do list that we want to achieve. And but when we know what the other levels of government are doing, Jonathan has no choice but to try to do what he can to bring budget down to something that is palatable to our residents. So I will be supporting the budget tonight, and thank everyone for the work that's gone into it.
Your Worship.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one other thing, and I think it's important for the public to be aware of the fact that it's 4.95% in total, but that includes 2.07%, which is going directly to our capital infrastructure needs, so that this is now, I believe since 2012, successive councils have now been allocating approximately 2% to our infrastructure renewal, which has put us in a much better position than most municipalities. The region is doing that now, but that's only been something that's occurred over the last 3 or 4 years. And so the public needs to know that we are, as Councillor Lewis has mentioned, investing in the community. We want to make sure that the residents have the access to the clean drinking water, the sewage needs, the stormwater management, the roads. And so bit by bit, we're getting there, and we're looking at the long term. So if you take that 2.07% out, we're really talking about a budget increase that's less than 3% at a time when costs have gone up, inflation has been high, supply chains have been affected. So I agree with all the comments that all of you have made, and we're fortunate that we have a staff that has been so dedicated to making sure that the residents do have value for the money that they're paying in taxes. So thank you, Mr. Jansen, thank you, Ms. Corney, and thank you to your staffs and all of the people who have assisted you, because it's all the directors, all of the managers. The CAO, I understand, had a part to play of some sort. But no, so yes, the recognition is due, and I just wanted to make sure that the public is aware of that.
Thank you, Your Worship. what's needed to be said has been said. We appreciate you guys very much. That'll bring me to calling the question. All those in favor as amended? Opposition? Carried. And Your Worship, I turn the chair back to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Flagg, and I want to thank you for guiding us through this budget process. It's been, it hasn't been easy, as your colleagues have indicated. You've done an excellent job, and I don't know whether you wanted to make any comments about this since we're almost through the process. As the chair, you of course couldn't comment, but you're not the chair now, so if you wanted to say anything, I'm happy to let you say your piece.
As I said, it's been my privilege to work with the individuals, Councillor McDermott on the committee, and yourself as well. A learning opportunity for me as an individual and as a councillor, and I don't take those lightly, and I appreciate the opportunity that I've been given. Thank you.
Great. Well, you're more than welcome, and thank you. We appreciate your good work. But as I said, 2026 budget looks like it needs some work soon.
We're on it tomorrow.
Perfect. Okay, scheduling of meetings. Councillor Noyes.
I just wanted to, I know we all received notice of this, that there's a meeting tomorrow here in the atrium by the region on the transit system, setting their priorities. And I'm hoping that one of their priorities is safety and accountability.
I'm sure that it will be. Any other meetings that anyone wishes to announce? We're back here on Monday at a special council meeting dealing with the strategic planning process. Councillor Dubanow, you interested in adjourning this meeting?
I would be happy to, Your Worship, to move that the Budget Committee adjourns at 8:15 p.m. this evening.
All those in favor? That is unanimous as well. Thank you all.